Okay, I think we can get going. Just making sure that hi Jaimon, Ian, if you could share your video. Hi. So great. So let's go to our next session. So managing the transition to native cloud security, challenges and opportunities. And it's a great pleasure to introduce you to Ian Ruthven, who is a product manager in the Microsoft Security Service line, and Jaimon Thomas, who is global head of customer engineering. And you know, this is going to be an interesting session. We've got quite a lot to cover, but maybe Ian, could you just kind of introduce yourself, just a little bit about what you do in Microsoft and what brings you here today?
Sure, thanks. Well, I mean, Jaimon and I have been working together for quite some time in terms of managed security services based on our Microsoft Cloud environments, right? So what I do at Microsoft is I am the product lead, I suppose, for what's called Microsoft Security Services for Enterprise, which is our first-party managed security service from Microsoft based on obviously our Sentinel and Defender technologies, right? So here today because Cyberproof asked, and we're a great partner. We have a great partnership, and thought it'd be a really good opportunity for us to share some of the insights and learnings that we've had as we've kind of gone along this journey.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian, and appreciate you spending the time. And it's somewhat early in the morning, so thanks for joining us. Jaimon, hi.
Hi, so Jaimon Thomas. So I've been working with Cyberproof for the last 5 years or so. Again, I have a long background on managed security services. So been doing a lot of work around how do we help our customers do effective threat detection and response capabilities. So again, pleasure to be here.
Great. And just before we get going with these questions that we've lined up for you, please, if you're new, you just joined the session and you have any questions, please submit a question in the Q&A and we'll get to that later on. We are sharing a number of links and resources. Please feel free to obviously download them and share them with your colleagues. And we will also be recording this session for availability later. So let's get going then. So first question, it's really driving this whole movement is what are actually the drivers behind the transition to cloud native security? And maybe Ian, what's your take on that? I know it's a broad topic.
It is definitely a broad topic, right? I mean, I think that a lot of the feedback that we're getting from our customers, right, and that we're hearing as we speak to CISOs and CIOs and other kind of security folks and cybersecurity folks globally, right, is that the burden of managing and maintaining the infrastructure to be able to to manage your SIEM, to run your SIEM, is taking a lot of effort away from the folks that are actually having to leverage these systems to be able to do their day jobs, right? To be able to hunt for threats in your environment, to be able to look out for things that are higher value targets, and some of that effort is going into actually managing the core platforms, right? Where the cloud allows us to provide those core platforms as a service, right? And it frees up the teams and the cybersecurity resources inside of our customers, so that they're able to actually focus on the higher value things in terms of actually looking for things and doing things that are in a lot of ways unique to their organization, the industry verticals, or them as a customer, right? So yeah, Jaimon.
Yeah, no, I think again, cloud native or cloud native security is the future, isn't it? Because this is what everyone is trying to drive towards to, for all the reasons that you just mentioned, Ian. And for me, one of the things that they're also trying to do is leveraging this is to fundamentally try to improve their cyber defense capabilities, because that gives a lot of opportunities in simplifying the overall operational process, because whatever you are actually building in the cloud is future proof. Because you build and set it up once, and then it scales. And it doesn't matter how much information data you throw at it. It kind of scales, cloud speed and scale. That's what kind of, again, Microsoft from a central point of view also kind of explains. So that for me, I think is the key thing. And all the other things that you just mentioned about the overhead, the hidden overhead of managing, maintaining the operational infrastructure kind of goes away, so that the team can focus on the key high value things that they need to do in terms of doing all the analytics, looking at how do they build the custom visualizations and other things on top of the capabilities offered by cloud. And sorry, go on.
No, I just thought that contributing to or adding to that, you highlighted that evergreen nature of a managed service or of a service like a cloud native security service, right? Whether it be a SIEM, whether it be something like a endpoint detection and response service, but because they're cloud-based, you have this the added benefit that you were kind of alluding to, right? In that they are evergreen, they do continuously evolve, and they do grow as services themselves, right? So instead of you and your team having to worry about making sure you're running the latest versions of the thing and have updated your servers and your threat intelligence connectors and all of those things are natively available and easy to consume, right? And to your point, you don't have to worry about where do you get the additional processing power if you suddenly have a peak required to do some additional analytics work, or if you want to go hunting back and do queries back on legacy data that may be stored in offline modes, right? So a lot of that sort of stuff comes into play as well. Sorry, Jaimon, to interrupt you.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I wanted to mention as well. I think you covered that quite well. So yeah, cheers.
What I'd like to do, actually, we as people who have been on previous sessions, we've been running polling questions throughout. So actually, what I'd like to do is actually launch a question for the audience, which is kind of talking around what you've just said, and ask people's opinion. What do you think are the major motivations for migrating workloads to the cloud? Is it optimizing operational costs? Is it improving cyber defense capabilities, future-proofing security monitoring, or simplifying operational processes? So, please take a moment and give us your responses. It'll be very interesting to see how this audience reacts to this topic, which we're spending our morning or afternoon work discussing. So I'll give it a few more moments. We've got okay, we've got, once we get to 50%, I'm gonna call it a close, and then let's see how what the audience think. Yep, okay, all right. So we've just gone over almost 60% now. So let's take a look at the results. So Ian, how do you look at this data? What does this say to you based on our audience? It's obviously an audience that's pre-selected. We're people who are interested in this topic already. But out of that, how do you read the data here?
So I always have a good chuckle when I see percentages and statistics, right, based on a specific sample size. It actually does reflect a lot of what we're seeing and what I'm hearing coming from our customers anyway, right? So I don't think there's much surprise for me. I totally understand why optimizing operational costs is lowest of the whole lot, and simplifying operational processes kind of second, right? Both of those things are, I think, parts of our topics for what we're going to chat about this today, right? Because that is ultimately where a huge amount of the doubt and the uncertainty in terms of cloud operations comes into play, right? And simplifying operational processes, well, that's a whole big thing all by itself, right? So the the obvious ones around improving cyber defense capabilities and future-proofing those capabilities, right? And the monitoring stuff. Those are almost table stakes, really, when you think about adopting cloud-based technologies in general, right? So within the security space, it really is just about how do we enable folks to be able to concentrate on the things that we need to concentrate on rather than the rest of it, right? But absolutely, also from a Microsoft perspective, obviously, looking at how we can provide those security services to help our customers so that they can get on with the business of their business rather than the business of cybersecurity, right? And that forms a fundamental part of our thinking in terms of the way that we have approached this, and the managed services and the other kind of products that we offer in this space, right? Jaimon.
Yeah, I think one thing I would love to see was like having multiple options to choose from. Because if you look at all of these, yeah, if you do one of these really well, it's kind of impacting all the others, So if you do, if you simplify the processes, for example, it's just definitely going to help you with your operational cost and improve your cyber defense and everything like that. So for me, this is all really interconnected. So you do one thing really well, it kind of helps with all the other things. So that's how I see it.
Yeah,
and sorry, Howard, very importantly, right? Jaimon kind of went in the direction there, which I, as you're saying it, I was like, that actually made me think is that if you try and do them individually, right, or as separate things, then you won't get the overall benefit, right? Because you need a way to measure, are you actually benefiting and are you actually simplifying your operational processes, and how do you measure that those are actually helping you achieve those objectives, other than the marketing version of, yes, it'll be better, yes, it'll be cooler, yes, it'll be faster, and we'll do all these cool things, right? But how do you tangibly and quantifiably show to the business that you're actually benefiting from these cloud-based services, right? Because if you're not going to change your operational processes and you're going to try and apply old school, well, I don't say old school, like if you want to apply the kind of same processes and things that you do on premise today, right, or with your existing environments in the cloud and using these technologies, then you're losing a lot of that benefit that you would get from using them, right? Because if you just apply the same model that you're using today into the cloud, you're probably not going to get the benefits that you're thinking you're going to get. You're just going to get the cloud in addition to what you're doing today, right? So it really is about kind of modernizing and going about adopting these technologies in a very deliberate way, and understanding that your processes, procedures, operating models, and all those sorts of things are going to have to be updated to be able to leverage these, right, and actually benefit from them.
Okay. Yeah, let's take that. I'll close that poll. We'll get to another one later on, but I actually want to take that as a segue. One of the things that I think has so far been mentioned the most is around costs. So question really, and maybe Jaimon, you'll kick off an answer on this one, which is your view is how do you maximize the cloud security investment, right, when you're transitioning to cloud native security? What are the things you need to be thinking of? What maybe also if you have any thoughts around customer examples perhaps, or anyway, I think it's a key. It really is a key question.
Yeah. So I would say again, specifically looking at from a security monitoring perspective, it's all about that. How do you take that small steps and then slowly improve, isn't it? So obviously, the key thing that we need to look at is how do we start with increasing visibility to the cloud workloads and cloud environments, and the best way to do that would be to start with, okay, what do I have in terms of monitoring from a native capability point of view? This could be all the native cloud workload stack that we can actually start looking at, bringing in from a security analytics and threat detection and response capability point of view. And then how do I start expanding that into other cloud workloads? So one thing that we have started seeing with organizations is that when they start hosting their applications or anything in terms of the cloud, they are looking at more cloud native. whether that is application hosting or otherwise. And there is a big difference between a cloud hosted and a cloud native, because if you look at a SIEM, for example, you would hear from many vendors that, okay, we actually have a cloud hosted or a cloud SIEM, but it's not quite that, so it's all about how do we leverage some of those capabilities in order to make sure it is providing that value, isn't it? So starting with increasing the visibility using native sources, there will be a number of integrations that we can bring in quite immediately. If you look at Microsoft Sentinel, based on the connectors, you can enable some of the out-of-the-box rules that provides a lot of value. Bring in external sources like threat intelligence data feeds, so that we can then do correlations. So I would start with what are the low-hanging fruit that will give value immediately, and then start expanding that into additional environments. Ian, do you have similar thoughts? Or?
Yeah, I mean, there's maximizing your cloud investments and security investments, right, is obviously a very big topic for us. Thinking about it from a Microsoft context, the way we license certain of our products, the way we include those as part of bigger bundles, right? And the value proposition behind some of those bundles, if we think about the M365 type space, right, where there's a lot of security entitlements embedded into that existing license and an existing agreement that a lot of our customers have, right? And sometimes they're not actually activating those entitlements and benefiting from the security that they provide, right, or the additional security that they provide, because the end user computing part of a business is different to the security part of the business, right? And they have different tool sets, and they have different language, and they have different stakeholders and P&Ls, right, at the end of the day. So the fact that you need to actively understand where the costs lie, where the technologies lie, and where the benefits lie, right, is part of that kind of adoption. And the change I was talking about just now, just before, was specifically around that, right, where if you're not looking at your operating model and leveraging the benefits that you might already be entitled to, but not fully utilizing, then you're also missing an opportunity there, right? All up looking at the understanding how to manage those costs and how to optimize those costs on an ongoing basis as well, right? Part of your operating model needs to be actively and proactively looking at your costs, your inputs, how you're ingesting logs, how all of these things fit together, and how they affect your cloud tenant, right, and your cloud environment, and the technologies that you are consuming from the cloud, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are actually a couple of kind of big, let me call them elephants in the room in some ways. And let's deal with them separately, because they are obviously very different. So the first one that I see is, how do you manage the transition, from, let's say, a legacy SIM into cloud native SIM or a multi-SIM environment? This is for many of the larger enterprises that kind of are making a strategic move. You will call it digital transformation, another buzzword. But Ian, how do you see this major issue? But at the same time, let's say it's an opportunity. Let's try to understand in the context of going from where we are to where we want to get to.
So I'm glad you used the elephant analogy, because the immediate cheeky answer is one bite at a time, right? Same way you always eat elephant. But ultimately, the thing with security that's, I suppose, very different to other modernization and transformation initiatives, certainly in my experience, is that you can't move from one way of doing things to another way of doing things and just have like a magical transition period where things just keep working, right? Or a hope is not a strategy in this case, right? You need to make sure that you've got continuity of service, right? Because continuity of service here for us means the difference between finding adversaries, being able to react to them, and not, right? So as you transition, you need to make obviously very, very sure that you have a very clear delineation of responsibility as you transition, that your team that is moving has the ability and the skills to do what they do today in the new environment, of course, right? And also that you're bringing across the and accurately importing and ingesting the signal from all of the systems that are within the scope of what you're busy trying to do, right? So, you know, there's a lot that we always talk about if you think about the data volumes and alert fatigue and all those sorts of things. So, as part of that transition period, we're seeing a lot of kind of overlap periods where we're running the existing environment and the new environment and making sure that we're seeing the same sort of results, right? Or well, hopefully better results because of all the additional benefits from the cloud space, right? But it's not it's about very, very carefully planning that transition and making sure that you understand what the boundaries of responsibility are, what the operating model changes are, and that you're identifying the gaps early on and mitigating against them, right? Because if you don't, you obviously have the opportunity of introducing a time where there isn't full coverage that you might need from a cybersecurity perspective, right?
Jaimon, what's your view on this?
Yeah, and you know, so like Ian said, I think transitioning from any SIEM to cloud native requires very careful planning. Okay, and if I try to simplify it, we need to probably look at into three different aspects of that. The first one is the data and the data that we bring in, the data sources into the cloud native environment. The second is how do you write the detection rules? Yeah, the ability to do the correlation and identify cyber threats. And the third one is the response features and capabilities that you need to build into the SOC. So if you start with the first, especially with the cloud native environment, we need to think through exactly how we are going to bring in data from on-prem, because and I'll give you an example of how we've done with some of our clients as well in a minute. But the key point is many at times there will be legacy systems that may not really support the way the cloud native infrastructure kind of work, the way of working. In simple terms, if you look at Sentinel, log analytics can only ingest data in a very specific format. So if you are bringing in, for example, something simple like Ceph, it needs, the data collection agents converts them into the format that log analytics can understand, so that it is in a streamlined fashion. So the first thing that I would say is when we look at it, we need to look at the data sources, especially on-prem, and see how we will be able to bring that in. And also we need to look at into when we bring data from the cloud environment, and this is probably same with any other technology, where there will be additional cost to extract data from a different cloud into Microsoft Azure, all that. Now coming to building the security analytics rules, every SIEM has got their own different way of doing it. Like I said before, in terms of collection, the same thing for detection as well. The features and functionality is super important, because some technologies like ArcSight, works on managing it, the way that they do data. The way they do data management is done all at the collection layer, whereas when it comes to technology like Sentinel, we want to bring as much as information as possible into the Sentinel environment for us to write, advanced correlation rules and stuff like that. So the functionality of different technology is super important when it comes to also looking at how do you write detection rules. And some things that we need to keep in mind, for example, again, with Sentinel, there is a rule limit of 512 scheduled analytics rules. That is not actually a limitation if you carefully plan how you build your detection capabilities, because fundamentally the detection should be defined based on specific threats that you want to be identifying in your environment. And You can also then use other features and capabilities such as hunting to look for specific threats as well. So, and I'll come to that in a minute. And then the final thing is, how do you respond? If you look at traditional SIEM, they offer very limited capability to do response, okay? Whereas Sentinel, due to its integrations with some of the technology stack and the SOAR capabilities Sentinel offers, while we build these rules, we are also able to write response procedures that will help us to respond in an effective manner. And that is super important, because detecting something is one thing, but how exactly you're going to effectively respond is super important. Now, coming back to a client example, so we had one client that actually had 3 SIEM platforms, and Splunk was the technology that they used for majority of their coverage. They had technologies like ArcSight and QRadar also within their environment, and they were a bit and the QRadar and ArcSight, to be honest, they were actually migrated to Splunk a few years back, and they still had residual technology there due to some of the challenges that they faced when it came to that migration into Splunk. So if you look at ArcSight, the big challenge was that they spent a lot of time, effort, and money, probably months or even years, to configure all their endpoint data sources to forward security events to specific ArcSight collectors and stuff like that. Now, to change from that ArcSight environment, which was on-prem, into a new security stack would require similar effort, because you are having to go individually to probably 10,000s of network appliances and go in and change them. And these kind of effort sometimes is probably not something the customer have initially anticipated when they were looking at that transition planning. The other thing was, if you look at QRadar, for example, they had a compliance requirement to store and archive the data for almost 13 months. So when you migrate the data or the technology into a Splunk, which they did, what they could not do effectively was to move the archive data from QRadar into Splunk, which meant that they had to keep the QRadar until that archival period was kind of coming to an end. So, in the end, what happened was they ended up having 3 SIEM technologies doing different things in their environment, and they were struggling to manage it. And they were really not too sure if they should go with the cloud-native solution like Sentinel, because they were genuinely concerned that they may end up having a 4th SIEM that will, be an overhead for them to manage. So ultimately, I think it's all about careful planning, obviously experience and expertise, and look at how you're going to be, like I said, these 3 things, looking at configuring the data sources and migrating the data sets, building the threat detection rules, and also how you then go about building the response capabilities. So,
thank you. So let's before we go to the next elephant in the room, I'd like to just take a polling break and ask just ask the audience the following question. Okay, so again, if you're directly involved or indirectly involved, where does your organization stand in relation to cloud migration? So is your organization going through a process at the moment? Are you planning on doing that in the let's say next 24 hours? Do you have a hybrid on-prem and cloud environment, or are you we're purely on-prem? So please just jump in if you know, or you think then please give us a response. It'd be interesting to see in this audience where people fall between these 4 options. Okay. I'm going to keep this Shouldn't take too long if you're with us and still tuned in. I know that there are lots of other emails and other meetings, but please give us your opinion. It's always interesting to get some feedback. All right, let's I'll give it another 5 seconds and then we'll take a look. Interesting. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the results. And so here we see. Okay, so people over 50% are actually has gone through a process of cloud migration. It's very interesting. So hopefully everything's sorted and we're as it were singing to the choir. Is that the term? No one on this call is actually in the planning process. Fair enough. And the other 50% essentially is the hybrid, which doesn't surprise me at all. Any thoughts on that? I know small pool of people, but any thoughts on that, Ian?
So I mean, I think that as far as multiple selections goes, the same thing applies that we talked about earlier, right? I think that we certainly don't expect the hybrid world to disappear anytime soon. As convenient as that would be for everything to move to the nice, new, clean, cloud-based environments, that's not really practical, right? There's a huge amount of organic investment that's gone into on-prem environments and systems that run that aren't cloud native and cloud friendly, even in a lot of cases, right? So a big part of what we end up doing is figuring out how to help with those legacy type environments as well, right? So in the hybrid world, yeah, so everything's all cloudy goodness, and we've got the SIEM in the cloud, and we've got detection and analytics rules and machine learning and AI and all sorts of cool stuff living in the cloud. But ultimately, the fact is that we still have a huge amount of legacy things to deal with, right? And if we think about the cybersecurity space specifically, a lot of our a lot of the intrusions and the attempted intrusions and things that we're seeing aren't in the cloud-based space because they use modern authentication mechanisms. They're highly secure. They're natively done. There's a whole lot of native functionality that speaks to cybersecurity, right? Whereas your on-prem environments and the hybrid environments have other pieces that may have been neglected from a security perspective in terms of some of those things that are natively available in the cloud, right? So we still have a lot of focus in terms of how we handle legacy identities, right? From a Microsoft perspective, obviously using things like Defender for Identity, using that back-end integration back into the on-premise Active Directory, and being able to pull those signals and provide some of the benefits that we're providing with our online identity providers like Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, similar type of functionality back into the on-prem environment, right? To the legacy Active Directory, and that's kind of a starting point. But ultimately, there's very few customers outside of some of the very specific verticals that might be have extreme on-premise type requirements that don't have some sort of cloud premise, some sort of cloud presence rather. So yeah, those numbers totally align with what we're seeing, right? But very much around the how do we include those hybrid environments, because there's very few apart from the kind of obvious born in the cloud type customers, which we do have, right? But for the majority of our customers, there's the on-premise things, the cloud-based things, and the poly-cloud things as well, right? Or multi-cloud stuff. We don't expect for one moment that Microsoft can be the only cloud provider, for example. I think we moved on from that very monolithic way of thinking many years ago as Microsoft as an organization, right? So yeah, Jaimon?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So that on-prem or hybrid thing is not going to go away anytime soon. But one thing that we are also seeing quite a lot is organizations are also leveraging a lot of SaaS kind of services as well. So they don't also want to be managing the overhead, because you need to have a lot of experience and expertise and skills in terms of managing the cloud itself as well. So increasingly, what I've also seen is that there is an adoption on SaaS kind of solutions, mostly with the clouds. With service providers, where they cannot, where there are applications and services that they can actually consume that way. So that is also a shift that I see quite a lot. But yeah, no, you're right. So it kind of ends up in a mixture where there is the hybrid environment, there is SaaS. And then exactly like you said, this new term called polycloud, that is one step above this multi-cloud thing. So yeah, we're starting to see that as well.
Okay, so it sounds like it's going to keep a lot of bright people employed for
totally.
time to come. So let's talk about the other really key issue. And that is, what are the factors that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about migrating data, into that cloud environment? Go on, Ian. I know that you have a lot of.
Go on,
I know exactly why Ian is laughing.
So, I mean,
it's a very similar conversation with one of our clients. Was it Monday? Yeah. So we just had that.
Go ahead. We'd love to hear an example.
I mean, the biggest thing with obviously bringing on data is making sure that data is in the format that you need it to be, based on all sorts of factors, right? Some of those factors might be regulatory, some of those factors might be based on organizational requirements, but ultimately, one of the benefits of moving into a cloud-based environment, right, is that you have the ability to keep a huge amount of data in a near online state. And I say near online state because there's various different strategies from different cloud providers in terms of how to make that real. But ultimately, moving to a position where your archived data, if you need to hunt through it for some reason, so say you've got data that is older than 12 months and you realize that there's been some event that needs you to be able to hunt across all of that and look back at that older data to see if some of those patterns were already in place or maybe it started earlier. The cloud gives you the ability to search across all of that in a kind of cohesive way, right? So on the Microsoft side of the house, we can use a combination of the data that's hot path analytics data inside of Sentinel, and offline data or near offline data in terms of something like blob storage or some other really cheap form of storage. But we can write queries that actually cross those boundaries, right, using things like Azure Data Explorer, and then that allows us to write a single query that can hunt the live data from Sentinel or the active data in Sentinel all the way through to the legacy data living in the kind of blob storage via Azure Data Explorer. Now, there's obviously some terms and conditions, as there always are, right? And ultimately, it's when you're ingesting that data in the first place, you need to make sure that it's in a format that's actually usable, right, and searchable. So I know that Jaimon will probably talk a little bit about some of the approaches we have there and the transformations and things that we can do as we bring that data in, right? But it may be that we depending on the strategy of your existing SIEM or your existing SOC, there's a huge amount of data that needs to be kept, and it's about defining a process that gets you that data into your new environment so that it's usable and not just there to tick a box against a compliance thing, right? Because ultimately that's one piece of it, but the usefulness of that data and the searchability of that data as a cybersecurity person is probably more important to me than the fact that it's ticking a compliance box that I'm keeping this for 17 months. Yeah, Jaimon?
Yeah, no, I think fundamentally it's all about how you plan it properly, because like you said, Ian, the thing is the data that is in the legacy environment is archived, often encrypted. It's also structured in a way that is with the current vendor technology can only read. So So the thing is, like, when you're extracting it, it's pretty much like, you have to replay that complete data back so that we can ingest that into a format which is more widely used. Yeah. So that's the first thing. It's all about working with the technology provider or the team to ensure that that data can be extracted and then obtained in a readable format, so that we can then further normalize that to use it for what we need. And many a times what I have seen with the archived data is that these are just archived, yeah, and done nothing with that. So you will probably be using that once in a while when there is a need to run some specific queries, and of course that's a very painful process, because you need to find exactly the date stamp, time stamp, what have you, then just replay that part. It's a really difficult process. So when you're moving the data, the key thing you need to look at is, what are we going to use that data for? And there is so much of opportunities that we have, isn't it, in order to run additional analytics and stuff. So one of our approaches to when we take this data, we build a similar schema, a similar structure to put the data in, so that we this is similar to what the schema is in Sentinel, for example. So that way, whatever queries, whatever security analytics that we are running in Sentinel can be extended to this data storage as well. Okay, so technologies we normally use is systems like Azure Data Explorer, which supports KQL, by the way. So the thing that we need to look at is, once you build that new structure, that really supports how we can then leverage some of the existing analytics rules and stuff like that. And also we need to then think through what is that we can use this data for. So in many times we can use this data to help with some additional hunting. So we hear about a new zero-day vulnerability. So we find that, okay, we will be able to look for a specific pattern. Our hunting team can build a hunting kind of a query hypothesis, what have you. And you can then go back to this information and then run that query without going through all these pain of replaying this data and doing all that kind of additional overhead and manipulation. We can also look at running data science activities. So one of the things that we are doing with one of our clients is using the archived information to run some very specific data science patterns to identify if we can look for repeatable actions that will help us reduce false positives. Okay, there is also areas where we can look at the data to say, how do we simplify the way that we will do threat detection, for example. And on top of all this, because technology like blob storage or ADX in this specific case supports BI tools, you can also run visualizations on top of that. So it is quite easy to create something as a visualized graph based on that data set, to see if we can identify some anomalies or something interesting that will help. Again, it kind of touches that data science and hunting aspects. But the thing is that there is so much of opportunities with this data, which we can definitely use if you are moving that into a cloud native kind of solution, rather than storing it in an archived compressed state, in a legacy system. So that's the point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, let's maybe talk a little bit about something that you both, I know, very actively involved in, but that I think it's important to kind of create some kind of connection between what are the benefits of leveraging this cloud infrastructure when providing managed security services. How do we bring, what are the benefits of bringing these two things together?
So
Jaimon,
I think so it's the ease of providing the service, isn't it? So if you look at when you see when you're looking at a cloud native environment, it kind of helps scale and helps. It provides that flexibility that maybe not an on-prem or a legacy environment kind of offers. So when you're looking at adding additional service component, whether that is integrating a threat intelligence feed or integrating or enabling an advanced hunting capability or any of that similar kind of service stack, the cloud native environment, in my view, provides a lot of benefits, and probably Ian can detail in terms of how Microsoft is looking at bringing all these different components into the Defender and extended detection and response stack. But for me, the opportunity is more about how we are enabling the the SOC analyst to scale and expand based on the capabilities offered. So like I said, hunting, for example, the data is there, the platform simply scales. So you are not limited to the underlying CPU and memory and the infrastructure to run a very complex query. Yeah. You can also add additional feeds into to do something very specific. Again, you're not limited by anything. So for me, that cloud kind of provides that scale and that flexibility to do things much more in a more effective manner compared to the legacy systems, which are kind of bounded by some other factors like the underlying infrastructure and the capabilities. But maybe Ian, you can probably expand a lot on.
So taking a slightly different angle, right? And I mean, totally agree with everything that Jaimon said, and just in support of that, right? Just thinking about the concept of providing a managed service across a dynamic, changing space, right? So if you think about all the products, the cloud-based products, the endpoint detection response products, even the SOC itself, right, or the SIEM itself, those are all iterating and living things, right? In terms of all engineering teams are adding functionality, they're adding features, they're adding capabilities, and those things are growing and iterating and dynamic in themselves, right? So the benefits for us or the benefits of consuming a managed service based on these technologies is that you have direct access to the latest things that are happening, right? So it's not that you have to wait until you've deployed vNext of the product that you're on to be able to benefit from those things, right? You get to benefit from them immediately. And it might sound like it's so what, right? But ultimately, it's a huge benefit if you think about the typical speed at which infrastructure iterates, right? And within the cloud environment, you need something that can keep up with that. A, the load requirements, and B, the speed at which things change, right? So the thing I've seen from a Microsoft perspective is obviously our ability to call on all of the different Defender technologies, right? And I mean, if you look at how that stack has expanded over the last few years, right? It's a huge amount of growth, right? There's some of it was through acquisitions, through things like RiskIQ and CyberX, right, where we did acquisitions that gave us the ability to do more in the operating, the OT type environments and IoT type environments, right? Some of it is in the threat intelligence space, where we're absolutely providing a way with Defender for TI, threat intelligence, to give our customers access to that same threat intelligence feeds that we use as Microsoft to protect our environments, right? And obviously, as part of building a managed service on top of all of these, gives us access to all of those technologies as they iterate, and the products as they iterate, but also the ability for us to help free up our customers' cybersecurity experts where they have them, right? To be able to go concentrate on things that are unique to their business, to their industry vertical, to those things that they're going to do, right? Because if you think about this as commoditizing the security space, the things that are known entities that are able to be applied using a use case or an analytics rule or something that you can get a machine to sort through the terabytes and terabytes of data that are being produced, right? or petabytes of data that are being produced ultimately. That's what machines are really good at, right? So it frees our hunting teams up to be able to go look for things that aren't obvious, that aren't the patterns that a machine's really good at spotting, right? And they can go and look at making those correlations between things that aren't easy for a machine to do, but humans tend to be really good at, and especially experienced hunters from a human perspective, right? And that's one of the kind of pieces around providing a managed security service using the cloud-based technologies, right? Is that it frees up our hunting folks to go and do high-value human-based activities rather than the things that are easily automatable and easily pushed back to the product to handle, right? So that's kind of the kind of different angle that I look at in terms of leveraging that cloud-native infrastructure to provide those services, right? So yeah.
Well, I think we have time for one more question. And again, I know this is a big topic, but let's have a go anyway. And you know, how are we going to manage and optimize the costs when transitioning to the cloud? It's at the end of the day, every department that's making changes, trying to keep up, it's going to come down to, for many of them, come down to costs. So how does costs get managed and optimized within this context?
Yeah, so I think we need to look into probably in two different angles, and I'll kind of look at how Cyberproof does this, and then Ian, you can also explain how the Microsoft kind of does and help look at, especially from a return on investment and value add point of view, total cost of ownership. So if you look at primarily from a cost optimization, the cloud cost is directionally proportional to two factors. One, the volume of data fed into the environment, and the second is how long you keep or retain this data for. Okay, so if I try to make it really simple, okay, so that's the two factors, and if you play with these parameters, that typically helps to optimize the cost based on what we are looking for, and this is primarily in a very simple way, Cyberproof's approach to help our customers, and if I just go down a little bit more on this, so this is where Cyberproof have helped customers to build some advanced data engineering capabilities from collection all the way to data storage and retention. So the first thing is, when you take data, what is that really you can do in terms of the data that you collect that is needed for real-time analytics. So if I try to give an example, you want to try and take data from a system to do a security analytics around failed login events, and if you're taking this from Windows events, for example, a Windows system or a server could be sending probably multiple types of event logs, and from that we should be looking at, okay, what is the 2 or 3 event types that we need to help with that specific security analytics role. So to be very specific, if for a log on and log off thing, you can actually look at maybe event ID 4624 and 4625. I think one of them shows a successful login, the other one shows a failed login. So you can use those 2 events, and using some advanced engineering, you can only send those 2 events from that specific system to send for real-time correlation, and all the remaining data that we collect from that endpoint can be forwarded to a long-term storage where we can retain that data for doing some advanced analytics or hunting and those kind of stuff. So the point I'm trying to make is that when we collect the data, so this is the first point about the managing the volume of the data coming into the environment. Obviously, we want to be able to collect as much as data as possible, but only send the necessary data into Sentinel for real-time correlation. And this can be done through doing event filtering. We can do that through event aggregation. we can do that through specific routing that we set up, so that only the needed one is actually sent into Sentinel.
Yeah, and in doing that, Jaimon, we have the ability to not lose fidelity of the data, right? Because the whole point of an analytics engine is for it to look for things at scale that we might not otherwise see, right? And if you're filtering what you feed into a machine learning algorithm, then it will see what it sees based on what it's fed, right? So there's that whole balance about understanding what can be disregarded and what can be sent off into the cold path from an analytics perspective versus the hot path, right? But you know, there is a huge amount of work that we've done in the space to be able to optimize that, right? Because ultimately, it makes no sense to ingest things that are not relevant and pay for that analytics processing on top of it, ultimately, right? And that's why, I mean, I know that as part of any of these managed services, the cost optimization pieces and making sure that you're actively managing your ingestion rates, your log sources, and it kind of highlights one of the kind of transition topics, which is how you actually do your log source and your log ingestion, right, in the first place, right? So what's raw log ingestion that you need. And we did cover that a little bit earlier when we were talking about the data importing and the archiving as well, right?
And I think it's also about how do you look at the total cost of ownership? Because I think many a times when we talk about the cloud cost, what people they don't compare apple to apples. They will say, oh, by the way, you know, this technology or this solution is costing us this, whereas the other solution is only half the price. But what they don't normally factor in is the underlying infrastructure that needs to be, you know, managed, the additional license fees and overhead that require to maintain that infrastructure, like, you know, in terms of the labor and the expertise that you need to do that environment. We also seen in many cases, you know, a solution like this could also help provide much more efficient way of SOC operations, you know, reducing false positives, for example. The ability to deploy an infrastructure, you know, infrastructure as a code, compared to taking, you know, multiple days, if not weeks, to get the whole thing set up and deployed. So infrastructure as a code is probably another way of, you know, deploying and managing the infrastructure. So the point I'm trying to make is that when it comes to managing and optimizing the cost, what we need to look at is from a total cost of ownership point of view and the return on investment. And one final point regarding that also is that many a times, and Ian covered it many times during this discussion, many a times these technologies require a lot of water and feeding. Yeah, so the license could be expired in few years' time, or, you know, you need to upgrade it, you know, you need to change software, you know, maybe the underlying infrastructure needs to be refreshed. So all these things are overheads, and the life cycle of that technology stack could be a 3 or 5 year long, whereas a cloud native solution is continuously, it's live. To Ian's point, it's just live and it's evergreen. So that's the key thing we just need to look at and take away. Ian, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, Ian, you know, maybe just to find, you know, any final thoughts. I mean, I know that we're really, in the time we've had, just scratched the surface. Anything you want to?
Yes, I mean, ultimately, I mean, you know, there is a whole lot of complexity, and there's, you know, I think I said right at the beginning, if you're going on a cloud journey and you're thinking you can apply the same thinking and logic and processes and procedures and ITIL-based things that you did in the past, you need to really sit down and have a good think about how you're going to actually benefit from the cloud if you do that, right? Understanding new operating models, understanding you know, how to best leverage these things, because they are different in some ways. So yes, it's a seam, but there's some benefits that allow it to be near real time as opposed to it being totally reactive, right? There's some proactive things that you can do based on the additional the additional kind of functionality that's available, and just making sure that you have these things considered as you go on this journey, right? But I think ultimately, we're here to help if you need us, and thanks for the time today.
Yeah, Ian, thank you. Really appreciate it. We're at the top of the hour. I just do one final plug, actually, is that we do have a workshop very much on this topic that we're running in conjunction with Microsoft. So if there's anyone in the session today or watching this on demand, if you're interested in doing if you qualify a free workshop, please reach out to us, and we'll get you connected to the right method of getting that. So Ian, really appreciate your time. Jaimon, it's great to see you again, and have you on the SOC Masterclass. So thank you, and thank you everybody for joining that. I hope you found it useful.